Hello and welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. Are you ready for some more scathing book reviews? I am. Let's go! Today we're reviewing Egyptian Prosperity Magic, Spells and Recipes for Financial Empowerment by Claudia R. Delaire, and Candle Magic for Beginners, Spells for Abundance, Love, and Healing by Mystic Dylan. Gotta love that name. Now, both of these books I bought with the words, "Okay, I'll bite." Egyptian Prosperity Magic happened to be at my local metaphysical shop. And I saw it and I said, well, you know what, it might be fun to read this and review it. Oh boy. The very first page has praise from none other than Uncle Buck. Not that Uncle Buck. Not Bucky. No, not Bucky. That Uncle Buck. The guy who wrote Uncle Buck's Big Blue Book. Wow. Sounds pretty impressive, right? Remember, Raymond Buckland is a Gardnerian Wiccan, not an Egyptian pagan. That gets kind of important. And by the way, this book is published by Llewellyn. Now, if you hang around the pagan scene long enough, you kind of notice there's an undercurrent of disdain for Llewellyn books. And I noticed that this was one, and I thought, well, come on, they can't all be that bad, right? This one is. Now, the intro and the first two chapters are fine. Her description of ancient society is generally correct, and her explanation of types of spells and magical tools and oils, it makes sense. So, we're off to a decent start. I'm reading it, and I'm bopping along. And chapter 3 deals with Egyptian deities for spells, being which ones you can invoke for specific spells. In this case, for prosperity. And I noticed this book was written around the time of what we now call the Great Recession. You know, the end of the double odds. So I'm reading this section, and it's alphabetical order, and so on page 33, what deity do I find listed as one you can invoke for prosperity? Apophis. No! Any Egyptian pagan worth their natron salt knows you do not invoke because he is the evil one. That's like asking Voldemort to be the keynote speaker at Hogwarts. And yet, 3 of her spells list him as a deity that you can invoke for prosperity, to clear obstacles, or to have a change of fortune. Yeah, good luck with that. I would liken invoking the serpent for prosperity to being at a football game and trying to help your team by using a tactical nuclear weapon. Yeah, you'll probably wipe out the other team, but there's going to be a lot of collateral damage, including you. But this is what happens when you limit your resources to dictionary or encyclopedia books on Egyptian religion, and don't read the ancients in their own words. Now, how can I tell that about this book? For one, it's in her bibliography. She doesn't even list any of Budge's books in her bibliography. Now, you've seen this channel and known I have verbally shredded books that use Budge as one of their primary sources, but she didn't even do that. She has things like a dictionary of Egyptian gods and goddesses, Encyclopedia of Gods, over 2,500 deities of the world, an illustrated dictionary of the gods and symbols in ancient Egypt. That's the thing. If you have A to Z books, it's easy to see where they might include the evil one for the sake of completeness, and that might give the false impression that the Egyptians saw him as a deity like the rest of them. And especially if you are a modern pagan that does not believe in evil or in a devil figure, which it's entirely possible that this author does not. Well, I have news for you. In Egyptian religion, that was their devil figure. Okay, the Egyptian Book of the Dead has spells to cast out the evil one. The coffin texts have a lot of spells to cast out that evil one. Notice that I don't even say his name except where I have to. The Papyrus Bremner Rend, 3/4 of it is ritual to execrate the evil one. Now yes, it can be challenging to read and learn how to figure out and understand some of these ancient sources. But if you're serious about being an Egyptian pagan, you need to do that, because nothing tells you about their religion like reading them in their own words, even if it's translated into English or, your mother tongue, be it German or French, whatever. As some in the pagan scene might say, are you serious about this, or are you a Llewellynite? Now, beyond that, her spells are very formulaic. I would say extremely formulaic. Now, I realize writing a book of rituals involves a lot of cut and paste, but damn, some people have said that when authors sign on to Llewellyn, they often sign on for multiple book deals. So she has also written a book on Egyptian revenge spells. I wonder what deity she invokes there. And Egyptian love spells. And it's entirely possible that she had to split her work up to make several books, and so you've got a lot of repetition in here. But still, every spell begins with the exact same invocations, and the primary action in each of these spells is to light a candle, use a particular blend of oils and herbs, light a paper with a written incantation on it on fire, and that's it. For one thing, Egyptian magic is a lot more dynamic than that. What I like to say about Egyptian Hika, ancient Egyptian magic, is that if you're not breaking dishes, setting things on fire, and then writing in crazy inks, you're not having a good time. But for another thing, if anointed candles are going to be your primary ritual tool, then you might as well go with Candle Magic for Beginners by Mystic Dylan. Now, the story for this book goes, I was looking for a handy print reference for color correspondences in candle magic, and I noticed in the description for this book that it has a Kemetic spell in it. And I thought, Kemetic spell? Okay, I'll bite. And sure enough, here on page 95 you have Kemetic Flame of Protection. And it's a very basic spell, but it's appropriate. You're invoking Ra, it's the sun god, for protection. Beats the alternative by far. And he uses a black candle. Personally, I would use red or orange if I was going to work with Ra through the form of a candle. But black is the standard Western candle color for banishing negativity. So, it works. This is an adaptation. And the author specifies as such. So, he's not trying to be something that he isn't. And overall, I would say that this is a much better book. And wouldn't you know it, it's not published by Llewellyn. Because it's not limited to the very narrow topic of prosperity spells, it has a lot more utility and variety, and it's a lot more readable. It even includes some spells for self-love and dealing with anxiety, which I think is an underexplored area of magic. One other spell that's in here is a Cleopatra's self-love spell that involves a candle and milk. So you might want to check that out. My only quibble is to say, because the author is a very, very eclectic pagan, and he does talk about some things dealing with New Orleans voodoo. But I would say take the things he has to say about Cajun folk practices with a little grain of salt, because New Orleans voodoo is a very different vibe from the ethnic Cajun vibe outside of New Orleans. And I say this having grandparents that grew up about an hour northwest of Baton Rouge. And so, you know, you pretty much have to be a native to know that that's a different thing. You know, so I'm telling you this, but I'm going to cut him some slack because it's not something that he would have known. But there you have it. One book that only has a couple of Egyptian-themed spells in it, but is still a better utility. And one book that somehow manages to embody everything wrong with mainstream paganism that uses Egyptian themes. I usually keep books that I review, even if they're bad. But I want to make an exception in this case. So what should we do with it? Phew, that was cathartic. Now, in case you're wondering, oh, do you think you could do better? Why, yes, I believe I can. I have started collecting notes with the intention of writing a book of Kemetic magic. And there are things that I've done for the last 10 years that I realized, hey, this counts as magic, I should take these notes and put them together. So that is something that I plan to do. But I have to finish a novel series first. I am working on the 4th and final book of my Metashifters series. If you're a fan of fiction, you might want to check these out, because eventually I do plan to get into some Egyptian historical fiction. But that's going to be after I finish science fiction, the story that I have to tell there. And if you want to get an idea for how I tell a story and develop characters and stuff like that, this might give you a bit of an idea. It's just, you're not going to see robots and lasers in ancient Egypt. Sorry if that disappoints anybody, but I will give some links for these books in the description. And of course, you can also support this and our other projects that we do by subscribing to this channel and joining us on Patreon. And there you'll get to see behind the scenes and exclusive content. And be sure to stay tuned for next month's episode. So, for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon wishing you Senepti.
Enjoyed this video? Then be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Kemetic Independent channel. You can also buy my books on Lulu.com, and special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Join us for updates, outtakes, and exclusive videos only on Patreon. Check the description for links.